I'd like to begin this evening. I'm going to talk about Iran and Israel tonight, principally, but I wanted to begin this evening with a few reflections on the operation last week against Osama Bin Laden. Nearly 2 years ago, and I had my office check the date on May 26, 2009, President Obama called Director Panetta, myself, and Mike Leiter, the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, and myself to the Oval Office. The Bin Laden trail had gone cold, and the President told us in no uncertain terms to expand and redouble the effort to find him and to make it the intelligence community's top priority. Dedicated professionals painstakingly scrutinized thousands of pieces of information until we found a man we believe was Bin Laden's trusted courier and began to track his movements. This was really the work of dozens and hundreds, at the end of the day, of intelligence professionals, which I'll talk about in a second, across really 3 administrations. In the months leading up to the raid, we combed the intelligence, worked over the options, met regularly with the President on the way ahead. And as the process culminated, having served 3 presidents, I was struck as to how quintessentially presidential this decision was. On Thursday night, the 28th, at around 7 o'clock, the President left the Situation Room, where he had received his final briefing on the various possible courses of action. In that room, the President had received divided counsel from his team and told us he would make a decision soon. That's not unusual with something this complicated, and a President wants to hear counsel, and he wants to hear honest opinions, and that even the counsel was divided. This is a difficult decision. The President stood up, walked out of the Situation Room, walked across the colonnade, past the Rose Garden, and went to his residence to make this decision, his decision alone. And the next morning at about 8:20, he asked me and a couple of my colleagues to come over to the diplomatic room and told us it's a go. And that's what strikes me now, that we ask our presidents alone to make these exceedingly difficult decisions, and at the end of the day, 300 million Americans look to him to make the right decision. And as long as I'm in Washington, and as many of these episodes as I'm involved in, I become increasingly struck by this, frankly. We all know the outcome, but I wanted to make tonight 5 observations about the operation and some of its implications, if I might, before I get to the body of my talk. First, the decision-making was truly emblematic of President Obama. It was intensely rigorous. He challenged assumptions. He pushed the analysis and the intelligence to make sure we actually knew what we thought we knew. We held more than 24 interagency meetings, and the President personally chaired 5 National Security Council meetings in the Situation Room in the 6 weeks leading up to the operation on May 1. When it came time to decide, there were a number of options on the table, courses of action, as the military likes to call them. The President chose to launch the raid that you are all so familiar with now, the helicopter raid deep into Pakistan to assault the compound and act against Osama Bin Laden and those who were harboring him. The President chose the raid, and I wanted to talk about this for a couple of minutes as to why he chose this course of action as opposed to others, which may have been less risky. One, he wanted to limit the risk to civilians inside Pakistan and around this compound, which we did. 2, we wanted to be able to prove we found who we were looking for, and we didn't want to just buy ourselves, frankly, a propaganda battle about the outcome here. And 3, and this turned out to be much more important than we even possibly could have thought at the time the decision was made, he wanted to be able to exploit any intelligence found at the scene, and I'll say more about that in a second. One more comment on the process under this first observation. Our team was able to maintain absolute operational security. Through months of work, not a single leak. It's a tribute to the team, the President's leadership of the process, the seriousness of purpose with which our government leaders went about this, and it was a key to the success of the operation. Obviously, if there had been any leak, Osama Bin Laden would have been out of there, and we would have undergone this operation at extreme risk to our operators. Second observation, the special forces who carried out this operation performed brilliantly. Our view, and the President said this on 60 Minutes the other evening, was, and this is the way intelligence works, these are assessments. You're balancing the information you have. The information in this case came from all manner of intelligence sources, interrogations, detainees, human sources, other liaison services, technical sources, and you weigh this. And at the end of the day, it was our view there was about a 50-50 chance that if we launched the operation, Bin Laden would be there. But what gave the President the confidence, I think, to go ahead with the operation was his 100% faith in the abilities of our special operators, who have conducted hundreds of these kinds of operations. And the interaction between him and these operators during the course of consideration of this, I think really did build tremendous confidence in their ability and the prudence and the care with which they go about these operations, considering all the contingencies. And there were a couple of these contingencies that came up during the course of it, which we were very happy that the operators had planned for. As the President said when he met last Friday at Fort Campbell, this group is the greatest small fighting force in the history of the world. This is also one of the great achievements in the history of the intelligence community, a success that was years in the making, and as I said, across 3 administrations, which is why the President's first 2 phone calls after he learned that our operators were safely back in Afghanistan, his first 2 phone calls were to President Bush and to President Clinton to review what had happened and to tell them that the United States had successfully launched an operation against Bin Laden and had brought justice to him. Third, as a result of the raid, we have the single largest trove of intelligence ever collected from a single terrorist leader. The intelligence community tells us it's the equivalent of a small college library worth of material. It's rather remarkable. Based on what we now know, we have tens of thousands of video and photo files, millions of pages of text, which if the intelligence community tells us if they were stacked would be tens of miles high. One fact is already crystal clear. Osama Bin Laden, from the intelligence in our initial review, Osama Bin Laden was not simply a marginal or symbolic figurehead in this organization. In fact, he remained an operational commander, a person directly involved in strategy, operations, propaganda, and personnel. And that's why, as I talked about earlier, the decision to pursue the assault option mattered so much. In that compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, we got quite a bit more than just Osama Bin Laden, which leads me to my 4th point. As of late 2010, and we said this at the end, during our review that was released at the end of the year, we assessed that al-Qaeda was at its weakest point since 2001. The successful assault on the compound was a strong blow, obviously, against the organization and an important milestone on the way to al-Qaeda's strategic defeat. But al-Qaeda faced other challenges as well, and I think this is very important given everything else that's going on in the Middle East. It faced an ideological challenge, a narrative challenge, which I think is very important to focus on. The Arab Spring presents al-Qaeda with a potent ideological challenge. For its entire existence, al-Qaeda's message has been that violence is the only path forward. It's never had an affirmative program which speaks to the aspirations of people in the Middle East. And it could not have been further removed from or relevant to those who came to Tahrir Square in this past January. My 5th observation on the Bin Laden raid. I didn't mean to give a whole other speech, but I thought it would be interesting to share these comments with you. 5th, and finally, our actions send a powerful message. Now, I want to go beyond the specifics of this operation and its impact in the Middle East and on al-Qaeda. It sent a powerful message to our friends and adversaries that we do what we say we're going to do. It's a message of persistence and determination and dedication. No matter what the obstacles, the United States does what it says it's going to do across presidencies and political parties. And the United States has the capabilities to do so. And these capabilities and this message were on full display a week ago Sunday. And that is an absolutely important message that resonates across our strategic interests globally. Now the determined pursuit of bin Laden is not the only example of where the administration seeks to match and has matched its words with action. I want to turn to Iran. We also do what we say on Iran and are pursuing this with similar persistence, dedication, and perseverance. President Obama has long understood the regional and international consequences of Iran becoming a nuclear weapons state. And that's why, as a matter of policy, plainly stated, we are committed to preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons, period. From his first days in office, President Obama has made clear Iran has a choice. It can act to restore the confidence of the international community in the purposes of its nuclear program by fully complying with the IAEA and Security Council resolutions, or it can continue to shirk its international obligations which will only increase its isolation and the consequences for the regime. There's no escaping or evading this choice. Already Iran is facing sanctions, and we have put an enormous amount of energy into this, as those of you who study this know. Already Iran is facing sanctions that are far more comprehensive than ever before, and as a result, it finds it hard to do business with any reputable bank internationally, to conduct transactions in euros or dollars, to acquire insurance for its shipping lines, to gain new capital investment or technology infusions in its oil and natural gas infrastructure. And it has found that, in that critical sector alone, energy and gas, close to $60 billion in projects have been put on hold or discontinued. Other sectors are clearly being affected as well, and leading multinational corporations, understanding the risks of doing business with Iran, are choosing no longer to do so. These companies you've heard of, Shell, Toyota, Kia, Deutsche Bank, UBS, Credit Suisse, to name a few, and the impact is real. Unless and until Iran complies with its obligations under the NPT and the relevant Security Council resolutions, as I said, we'll continue to ratchet up this pressure, working with our allies and partners around the world. As the President said, Iran can prove that its intentions are peaceful, it can meet its obligations under the NPT, and achieve the security and prosperity worthy of a great nation. It can have confidence in the Iranian people and allow their rights to flourish. For Iranians are heirs to a remarkable history, but the choice is theirs. That's why, with all the events unfolding in the Middle East, we remain focused on ensuring that Iran does not acquire nuclear weapons. But as you all know, the Iranian regime's nuclear program is part of a larger pattern, and I want to talk about this for a couple of minutes, of destabilizing activities throughout the region. In Iraq, where our former general commander there, General Odierno, said last summer, quote, Iran continues to be involved in violence specifically directed at U.S. forces. In Syria, where it has helped the Assad regime suppress pro-democracy demonstrations, and in Lebanon, where it continues to arm Hezbollah. So make no mistake, we have no illusions about the Iranian regime's regional ambitions or their activities. We know that they will try to exploit this period of tumult. They didn't cause this period, by the way, but they are trying to take advantage of it, and we need to remain vigilant. But we also need to remember, and this is what I wanted to talk about tonight, that Iran has weaknesses and vulnerability. And at this point in history in the Middle East, this is a very important thing to focus on. There are competing narratives. There are competing models in the Middle East right now. And Iran's model, like the al-Qaeda model, as we talked about a couple of minutes ago, lacks a vision relevant to our times. It's a model that could not be more out of step with the sentiments of the Arab Spring. And I wanted to think about this systematically for the talk tonight. And I put forth, in my judgment, 4 characteristics that the Iranian model currently has in the path that they're on. 1, a corrupt and misguided and isolated economy that offers the younger generation little hope for a better future. It's increasingly working for the security services, like the IRGC and elites, and not for the people of Iran. Number 2, the denial of basic the human right of freedom and expression, the very liberties people across the Middle East are prepared to risk their lives to claim. 3, a political leadership focused on preserving their reign at all costs, unleashing violence against their own citizens rather than enabling their citizens to flourish. And 4th, and I think really importantly, the pursuit of policies that have increasingly made a great civilization and people an isolated state, increasingly unable to carry on basic interactions with the rest of the world. So it's no surprise then that Iran's worldview bears little or no resemblance to the movements afoot in the streets of Tunis, Cairo, Benghazi, and Dera. Iran's leaders attempt to declare themselves the inspiration for these demonstrations, but it's belied by their own hypocrisy, demanding justice for others while crushing their own people's demands. Our observation is that since the 2 elections in June 2009, the regime has been heavily focused internally on silencing dissent and preserving itself. And as you might expect, we now see fissures developing among the ruling class, a dispute that has nothing to do with meeting the needs and aspirations of the Iranian people. It reflects a fundamental question: whether Iran has the confidence to engage with the outside world, a prospect that it has been offered and that it is in the overwhelming interest of its people. As the President said to Iran's leaders, quote, "We know what you're against, now tell us what you're for." Externally, Iran's destabilizing activities, again trying to take advantage of the turmoil in the region, are backfiring by uniting its neighbors in the Gulf against it more solidly than we've seen in years. This was something I heard often when I visited the Gulf last month and spent quite a bit of time with leaders in the Gulf. This is something Arab leaders are saying not just in private, though, but in public as well. The Gulf Cooperation Council recently said, and I quote, that it's deeply worried about continuing Iranian meddling and accused Tehran of fueling sectarianism. I want to be clear. The door to diplomacy remains open to Iran, but that diplomacy must be meaningful and not a tactical or cynical attempt to ward off further sanctions. These choices remain available to the Iranian government. In the meantime, though, America and our partners will keep up the pressure by continuing our current sanctions and seeking new lines of sanctions to target. We'll continue the hard work of building a regional security architecture, maintaining a strong military presence, equipping our friends with early warning and missile defense systems, including our phased adaptive approach. We do all these things because they are profoundly in our national interest and because America stands by its friends and allies. Now, in this region, we have no closer friend or ally than the state of Israel. And I'm very pleased to see my good friend Uzi Arad here, my counterpart from Israel. And I'm going to talk, Uzi, about a number of things we've done together since we've been in office. The U.S.-Israeli relationship is a close friendship, rooted in shared values and common cultural ground, but it has evolved, and this is the way I've thought about it from the outset in our administration, into a multi-layered strategic partnership to advance shared interests and counter common threats. And we really do, I'll pause for a second, view this as layers of a relationship, from the strategic down to the very tactical. And I'll try to describe it along those lines. Our commitment to Israel's security is unshakable. We understand the threats that Israel faces. We have to understand them because those who threaten Israel also threaten us. Now, as I said, this starts at the strategic level, where our two nations have worked together from the certainties of the Cold War to the uncertainties of the Arab Spring to forge a conception of strategic landscape. We've differed at times about the exact contours of the landscape, but through sustained and open dialogue, we have enriched each other's understanding of the security challenges we all face. And this is at the core of an alliance and a partnership, understanding and having a shared threat assessment and what to do about it. We've shared our best thinking about the most effective ways to match our resources with the requirements that flowed from our strategic worldview. At the highest level, there are regular meetings and phone calls between President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu. They'll meet again next week at the White House. We also conduct these decisions through an array of other channels below the President and Prime Minister level, the Strategic Dialogue, the Joint Political Military Group, and many more. These channels have been ongoing and have proved their worth at every level of government. The enduring relationships that our senior leaders have forged with their Israeli counterparts have produced a rock-solid foundation of trust between the Pentagon and the Israeli Ministry of Defense. In 2010 alone, there were nearly 200 senior-level DoD visitors to Israel, and Israeli defense officials visit us here just as often. Our multi-layered dialogue has produced concrete steps that enhance Israel's security. While some are focused on noise and distraction, we're focused on the fundamentals. And let me say this as plainly as I can. And I gave my partner here, Dennis Ross, a hard time earlier, but I think, Dennis, you were there at the beginning of the Israeli-U.S. strategic dialogues in the Reagan administration. So I'll say this, I'll say this without fear of contradiction by one of the original participants. The fundamentals of the security relationship between Israel and the United States are stronger now than they ever have been. Everyone in this, thank you. Everyone in this room knows that we're committed to maintaining Israel's qualitative military edge and back that commitment with about $3 billion of foreign military financing every year, regardless of the budget environment. This has helped Israel secure its future in a tough neighborhood, and at the same time, we've made our own best technology available, such as the Joint Strike Fighter and sophisticated standoff weapons, so that Israel can defend against evolving threats. For more than 2 decades, the United States has also been working with Israel to improve its protection of its population from very real and the urgent threat of rockets and missiles by partnering with Israel to develop an extensive missile defense architecture, and this has been critical. We cooperate across the continuum of development, deployment, and operation of these systems. Our financial and technological support was essential to the Arrow and David Sling system to defend against long and short-range ballistic missiles. Now, there's a recent example of our President and this administration's commitment to protect Israel from rockets and missiles, and it's our support for Iron Dome. This is an underreported story in the United States, I think. It's an advanced short-range rocket defense system developed by the Israelis that has recently been deployed. During the 2008 campaign, Senator Obama visited Israel, where he saw firsthand the damage from waves of rocket attacks. So last year, the President requested that Congress provide Israel with an additional $205 million on top of our FMM support for the production of Iron Dome. Throughout its development, the United States cooperated closely with Israel, and the additional funding for Iron Dome requested by the President will allow the IDF to deploy additional assistance throughout Israel in the years to come. And already, Iron Dome has proven its worth by intercepting 8 of 9 rockets fired at Beersheba and Ashkelon in one day. So we're proud to stand behind this project and many others. It's imperative that we do so because there can be no peace without security. But the relationship between peace and security is both intricate and reciprocal. There will not be peace until Israel is secure, but Israel can never be fully secure in the absence of a credible peace. That's why from day one, President Obama has been committed to a process that can lead to 2 states, a Jewish state of Israel and a Palestinian state, living side by side in peace and security. An enduring 2-state solution can only be achieved through negotiations. There are no shortcuts, but no one should take comfort in the status quo. As we learned in the Middle East, the status quo is never static. There are demographic and technological clocks that keep ticking. There's a new generation of leaders who will emerge in the region as a result of the changes that are now taking place. And it is in everyone's interest to see that this peace is possible. Across the Middle East, this is a time of unprecedented transformation and uncertainty. And I know there are those who see the specter of new threats and great risks on the horizon. And I live in a world every day where I specialize in looking at that. And we understand that view. Even without its leader, Qaeda continues to plot the death of innocents. Iran retains its nuclear ambitions and destabilizing activities, as I talked about tonight. And Israel and America continue to confront a range of threats. We will remain ever vigilant to these challenges, but it is also a time of great opportunity for America and its allies. Our administration came to office determined to restore American prestige, authority, and influence in the world. This means not just charting a bold course, but following it. Not just setting difficult goals, but having the persistence and the determination to achieve them. Not just saying what we intend to do, but doing it. On the threat from Qaeda, Iran, and Israel's security, we're doing just that, and I really appreciate your patience. Thank you.